It's hard to understand if you don't have kids there, but what we really see these schools doing is they are trying to take our kids. It sounds extremist, it sounds alarmist, we sound like conspiracy theories, I get it. But when you actually look at the curriculum, back in 2020 especially, schools were really focused on teaching our kids that America is an awful place, that families with a mom and a dad, the nuclear family, was a bad thing. They're really trying to take over our kids, get them to trust them as the adults in their life, and then teach them everything they want. Critical race theory, critical gender theory, the list goes on and on and on. At the end of the day, it's really to take our kids from our homes and our teachings.
Hello, moms, dads, and grands, and welcome back to M4L Academy. We are the school for parents, grandparents, and friends who are committed to defending and preserving liberty with a special focus on topics that impact kids, schools, and of course, parental rights. Today, we're joined by Kim Hermann of the Southeastern Legal Foundation to talk about one of the most important issues facing families right now, parental rights in public schools. Parents are constantly told to trust the system, but too often, they're left out of the loop when it comes to what schools are teaching, what data is being collected, and even really important decisions that are being made about their children. And that's why this conversation matters. Kim has spent years trying to help families understand their rights, challenge overreach, and learn how to stand up in practical, effective ways. Now, don't worry, there's no need to panic. This isn't anything crazy. It's about knowing the law, knowing your rights, and knowing what to do when those rights are ignored. All right, so let's get into it. Welcome back to class. Welcome to the program. We're so excited to have you back.
It's great to be back with you guys.
Well, last time that you were here was in August, and we talked about all sorts of interesting things, really like preparing for the school district, back to school. But for our folks watching who don't actually know your organization or you, why don't you give us a little background of Southeastern Legal and what do you do for families?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I'm also a mom, right? So I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. And so just like all of you watching, I am in this fight with you every single day as a parent. But at Southeastern Legal Foundation, we are the country's oldest conservative public interest law firm. And all that means is that we sue the government on your behalf, and we've been doing it for 50 years. In the school space, we fight to save America's schools, and we launched this program back in 2020 when our eyes were opened with all of yours.
I feel like that is it, man. Like 2020, that is the way to say it. Everybody's eyes was open then. So super quick, I wasn't going to ask you this, but it occurred to me while listening to you say that. Why should people care about the fight for public schools? Because you say you have kids, we have kids. So of course I'm going to care, but why? What would you say to people who don't have kids? Why should they care about the fight for public schools?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to understand if you don't have kids there, but what we really see these schools doing is they're trying to take our kids. It sounds extremist, it sounds alarmist, we sound like conspiracy theories, I get it. But when you actually look at the curriculum, when you look at the fact that back in 2020 especially, schools were really focused on teaching our kids that America is an awful place, that families with a mom and a dad, the nuclear family, was a bad thing. It was not something that you wanted to strive for. And so they're really trying to take over our kids, get them to trust them as the adults in their life, and then teach them everything they want, right? So in other words, you're talking critical race theory, critical gender theory, the list goes on and on and on. But at the end of the day, it's really to take our kids from our homes and our teachings.
And when they control the kids, when they can brainwash our children, then it controls the future. in reality.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people call it a culture war, and maybe it's just because I'm a constitutional lawyer, but I call it a constitutional war,
Oh,
truthfully, because at the end of the day, it really comes back to teaching kids to hate America and teaching kids to hate a way of life that has sustained this country for 250 years. And so when you really dig deep down into the curriculum, that's ultimately what you see. And that's why we knew that we had a fight. Right, in 2020, my kids were little. I wasn't quite there yet, but we're here now and we're still fighting. And it's just, to me, it's the most worthy battle that any of us can fight if we love our country.
I love that you call it a constitutional fight. Did you happen to read The Age of Entitlement by Christopher Caldwell?
I have not read that yet.
Strongly
I'm putting it on
recommend
my
it.
list right now, my summer list.
It's a good one. It's very easy to read. I do a lot of audiobooks, but in any case, he mentions the concept of two different constitutions, and it came about especially through the civil rights era. Anyway, I will leave it there for you and everyone to just as a recommendation to read it because it is interesting. So let's dive into the basics. Let's talk about some of parental rights in public schools, because I think a lot of parents don't actually know what protections are there, what their rights actually are. So we're going to talk about some of the big ones today. Let's start with FERPA and PPRA. What are those laws?
Yeah, so both of these are laws that were passed by Congress. So they're federal laws. First, we'll start with FERPA. And honestly, you just need to know it as FERPA. You don't need to know what it stands for. FERPA is all you need to know when you go into your schools and you talk to them. What it does is it protects you as a parent with your right to get access to your students' information and to prevent the disclosure of that information to other people. So this is really a right that belongs to you as a parent, individualized to your students' records and any information that is particular to your student.
Okay, so that is really helpful because we have a lot of records now.
There's a lot.
There's so much data, so much data. So is PPRA similar? Does it cover something different?
Yeah, so PPRA is actually it's a different law. PPRA relates more to your access to what they call instructional materials. So
Okay.
instructional materials are going to be anything that is related to what happens inside a classroom. So it could be your teacher trainings. Those are considered instructional materials, your lesson plans, the actual curriculum. Surveys is a huge piece of PPRA. And I know we'll probably dive some more into that because I really want to stress that piece to parents in a moment. But it's important to understand that instructional materials means anything that's happening inside your child's classroom, with the exception of exams. So you don't have a right to get tests because those can be passed on. I mean, I think we can all understand that as a parent, right? Remember that in school, you get your test back, you have to turn it back in, you see your grade. But anything else, it gives you a federal right to get access to that information.
Interesting. So then with that, it sounds like I'm just going to restate this, even though I'm pretty sure you said it already. Even things like supplemental materials that a teacher that may not be something provided by the school, but they went out to Pinterest or wherever. And I think I heard it was it Robert Pondicio said something like lessonplans.com or something where they share lessons. So anything that a teacher would get, you can have access to.
Yep, absolutely. Anything. And PPRA also has another component about the surveys that I mentioned. And so if the school wants to ask your child anything about, there's a long laundry list of this, but anything about race, sex, sexual orientation, sexual activity, family relationships, religion, income, the list goes on, and they're bullet pointed out in the law, and they're actually bullet pointed out in one of the guidebooks that we have available on our website. They have to get your consent. So it's not a opt out when it comes to these surveys. They actually have to tell you in advance, we're going to be asking your child about race. We're going to be asking your child about sexual orientation, about sexual activity, family relationships. And they are supposed to get your consent before they give your student those surveys or ask them the questions. It could be informal, right? It doesn't have to be a formal ask of those things. And if they don't, they're actually violating federal law.
So I want to cover some of the basics, some other ones first, but I want to come back to that because I know for a fact I have seen numerous examples of schools giving these surveys and not notifying parents. And I feel pretty darn certain that my school, maybe, unless there was a notification that I don't know, maybe it was like a little pop-up that you click accept and sign your life away, but I don't remember ever getting any sort of consent request. So I'm curious to talk about the enforcement mechanism of that. But first, before we do, let's talk a few more of the basics. So another thing that affects parents in schools, kids in schools, we've got several pieces from the Civil Rights Act. So we've got Title VI and Title IX. And we're all pretty familiar with Title IX, but you could talk about both of them.
Yeah. So those are terms, obviously, everyone pretty much knows what Title IX is now. Title IX is a federal law. It's part of the Education Amendments from 1972. So it's over 50 years old now. And it protects, it really is made to protect girls in schools and to make sure that girls and women have the same opportunities that are afforded to boys and men in our school systems, right? So this applies to public colleges. It applies to public K through 12. It came about because girls couldn't even get into med school. A lot of schools prohibited them from taking a business major. A lot of people think it's a sports bill. It actually had a lot more to do with education at the time. And then shortly thereafter, it started to be applied to athletics. So it's really, really important law, been around for over 50 years by Congress, and it prevents our schools from discriminating on the basis of sex, which we all know means biological sex.
Mm-hmm. And what about Title VI? That's another one.
That's Title IX. Title VI is something that a lot of people maybe haven't heard about, but they actually understand better than they realize, because we all know that the government cannot treat people differently because of the color of their skin, right? That is a basic understanding that everyone should know in our civil rights laws. You would hope so. You never know with curriculum these days. But Title VI takes those protections that we have in the Constitution, and they actually apply them to any government entity that receives federal funding. So here it's going to be our K through 12 schools and our public universities, that if you receive federal funding and you are treating people differently because of the color of their skin. So in other words, you are offering a class to, let's say you're offering a class to white students that you're not offering to Black students, or you're offering a club to Black students that you're not offering to white students. That is a violation of Title VI, and your federal funding can be pulled because of it.
Wow, that is interesting. So I am seeing, I know I've seen across the news a number of states, I think California is definitely the most notable, that flat out said that they were going to not listen to the Title IX requirements from the Trump administration. And I feel like this is connected to a follow-up question I had for you of federal policy versus school policy. Mm-hmm. So it seems pretty wild to me that a state would say, oh, no, we're just not going to listen to it. That doesn't seem like they should be able to do that. But can you unpack a bit, why should parents understand, or what do they need to understand about these being federal policies versus school policies?
Yeah, so you've got multiple layers of government here, right? We've got our local school districts, we've got our states, and we've got our federal government. All different levels of regulation and different layers of regulation. A school district has to follow its own rules and regulations and policies. It also has to follow the state laws, and it has to follow federal laws and the Constitution. When we're talking about things like Title VI and Title IX, these schools are receiving federal funding. And as a condition of receiving that federal funding, they're required to follow Title VI. They're required to follow Title IX. And so if the Department of Education launches an investigation and finds that they're violating Title VI, right? We have several Title VI complaints that are active right now on behalf of clients in various school districts. In one of them, there was actual segregation where our client went into the training. She is a teacher. She went into the training And they were told in the email that white teachers go to one room and non-white teachers go to the other room to learn about it was a DEI training, to learn about how to bring DEI into the classroom.
Oh my goodness.
And it wasn't just one training. This happened again and again. So that's just an example. Then the Department of Education can come in and say, you're violating Title VI. We're going to move forward with an enforcement action against you. And unless you get in line and agree to fix these problems and remedy it, we could pull your federal funding. And so they do have some bite to them. The investigations take a long time, of course, right? Just like any legal proceeding does. But they're there to protect our students, our teachers, our parents, everyone in our schools from these egregious violations.
Well, that is surprising to me. I just saw something yesterday that was talking about anti-racism, and that sounds like that example would have fallen into the concept of anti-racism, which I insist is completely made up. I don't think there is anything such as anti-racism. Is just all racism. But in any case, so am I correctly understanding that the real enforcement is entirely in the funding area? Is that fair?
Not entirely, but
Okay.
when you're coming about Title VI and Title IX, absolutely, right? There's many other federal law protections that you have, right? So we do still have the Constitution. So the Equal Protection Clause also prohibits schools from treating people differently because of the color of their skin. We have a First Amendment, right? And I'm sure we'll talk about that some. We talk about it all the time with our Moms for Liberty friends, that the schools can't compel speech or discriminate against your speech because of your viewpoint. So there's other federal law mechanisms, but when we're talking about these really key ones, Title VI and Title IX are powerful tools for parents, because if they file these complaints and if they file them properly with the right amount of information and the right level of detail, where it gets the Department of Education's attention and they launch an investigation, there can be a real bite to stopping them. They are a really, really important tool in our toolkit.
That's a really good point. I actually do want to hone in there for just a second to talk about the First Amendment because you bringing this up, and you did it last time too, which I'm so appreciative of, because I don't really hear the concept of compelled speech being covered as much. It's more this idea of, I should be able to say whatever I want, etc. That's what I hear the most frequent. So, but I feel like there's so much strength behind the statement or the part of it that is, we cannot have compelled speech. So can you just give us an example of what that would look like in schools?
Yeah, so it depends on if we're talking about students or teachers, but let's just talk about students for now. And this is something that we talk to parents a lot frequently about, especially when we got into this, because a lot of parents will say, well, my student had to write a report on X, Y, or Z, and they don't agree with X, Y, and Z, but they had to write a report on it, or they had to do something from this perspective. That's not really compelled speech, right? Having to do an assignment, take a certain point of view. That's what we do in law school constantly, right? We're constantly forced to take both sides. That's a skill set that you want to learn in life sometimes. But compelled speech is really when a school, so a public school, is requiring you to attest or affirm something that you don't believe. So let's think about this in terms of something that's easy, a so-called preferred pronoun. So if there's a boy in class who wants to be called a she, and the school is requiring you to use what I call an incorrect pronoun, that is compelled speech. Now it's working its way through the court system right now, and we've had some differing opinions, but we've also gotten some really strong legal opinions saying that's compelled speech. It violates the First Amendment. You cannot do that. The Pledge of Allegiance, that is something that schools cannot require your student to do.
Really?
That is the number one case on compelled speech out there. A very, very famous case at the U.S. Supreme Court, Barnett. And they flat out said that a school cannot require a student to pledge allegiance to the American flag. Now, the student can't sit there and flick the flag off or be disruptive, but they do not have to stand. They do not have to say it. They do not have to put their hand over their heart.
Oh, wow. Well, geez, I feel like preferred pronouns seem like a much right in line with that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I guess I knew that. It's funny because I do remember actually hearing about that, but I haven't thought about that in quite a while. And I guess
It surprises a lot of people, right?
yeah,
But I mean, what I always say is if a school can't require your child to pledge allegiance to the American flag, then it certainly cannot require them to pledge allegiance to a BLM flag or
yes.
participate in a pride parade, which
Hmm.
down here in Georgia, we've been out of school for several weeks already, but there's plenty of schools that are still in session and it's June and they're forcing these kids to partake in pride parades and hold signs and wave flags and pledge allegiance to these things. That's arguably compelled speech and should
I'm
not
su-
be allowed to happen.
I'm surprised that these cases. I guess I felt it seemed like it would have been further through the courts at this point. Well, hanging in
Yeah.
there that we
You got to
will.
sue. You got to
Yeah,
sue in order to make them through, right? So there's my
that's
pitch
true.
is that parents, we want to hear from you. We want to file these lawsuits for you.
Yeah, so we can get this established because it
Yeah.
needs to be. So, where within these, we covered a lot of important basic rights for parents to understand. Where do you think that parents most often misunderstand their own rights, and especially as it's related to their kids in school?
That's a great question. I think there's kind of two places, and I think that they're in extreme opposites. There's parents who just don't think that they have rights, right? It's, well, the school said this and the school said that, and what am I going to do? And it's so confusing and I can't figure it out. And so I'm just going to have to go along with it, or I'm going to have to pull my kid, like they said they have to take the survey and they took the survey. So, oh, well, when in reality, it's really not that hard to understand these basic terms and these basic rights that you have as a parent. And you just kind of need to go with your gut, is that if it doesn't feel right, then it might be illegal and it might be unconstitutional. And so I would say, get the very basics of it. Watch the M4L Academies. There's so many on the basic kind of legal boot camp is what we call it. I'm here at SLF. The basics of the law to know that you have those rights and reach out to somebody. And then you have the other extreme where parents think that they have so many rights that they can stop a school from doing everything. And we just can't do that, right? If you want a school that is exactly what you want it to be, then you need to homeschool. You need to look at alternative options for your kids that will fit your family better. But it's kind of somewhere there in the middle of making sure that you know you have rights, but knowing that they do stop somewhere,
Hmm.
because if the school was going to be right for every kid, it couldn't operate.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I feel like I think there's a lot of parents that I definitely fell into this camp where it was, well, it doesn't, I'm not going to make too much of a fuss. Of course, that
Mhm.
wouldn't, I just accept it and move on kind of thing. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore.
Nope.
I really appreciate the point of getting to take a minute to just understand the basics of these things and I do want to encourage parents. I know I've had other guests, other people talk about it. You talk about it. Talk to your kids. Make sure
Yeah.
that you're encouraging that conversation early with them so I am a very unafraid of confrontation person, and I always tried to be careful with how I would portray that to my children. But I guess I came across a little aggressive because my kids were always like reluctant to. They just didn't want to make a big deal, They didn't want to make a fuss or
Mhm.
anything. So I'm always encouraged when I hear about other kids that are like, "No, we're not letting them get away with this," which is good.
Yeah. And
That's
it's
neat.
important. You teach them to do it the right way and how to stand up for themselves and how to stand up for their rights.
Yeah.
I just, education is the key here, right? We're fighting for our kids' education, but we have
Yes.
to remember that as adults, we're continuously learning also. And there are ways to learn the basics of the law where you at least just have the language to use to go in and ask those questions. And you don't need to go in real hot. Go
No.
in and ask the questions. A lot of these teachers are on our side and they just feel like their hands are tied.
Yeah, I appreciate highlighting that as well because there really are so many good teachers out there. It's not
Mhm.
not every teacher is a libs of TikTok teacher. They're just
No.
not. So that's important to know too. All right, so these laws sound great. Everything sounds good always on paper, but what does the enforcement mechanism look like? Why do these laws kind of, I don't know, do they feel like they really have any good, you talked about some enforcement, but do they have real teeth?
Yes and no. Right. So if we kind of take them in turn, FERPA and PPRA are the two that are, I would say, the most challenging. And I hate to even say that, and I hate to acknowledge it, but it's important that parents know that. So if your school violates FERPA, if they refuse to give you your child's information, or if they disclose it to somebody that they're not supposed to disclose it to, that you have not given consent for them to disclose it to, then you can file a complaint with the Department of Education. A lot of times there is a state component and potentially a state law that is similar to FERPA. And so you'll want to look that up. And with AI these days, you can find that information terrifyingly fast, to be honest. It might not be accurate, but at least it gets you down the right rabbit hole, if you will. Yeah. And so you can file that complaint. The same with PPRA. You can file that complaint. Unfortunately, the courts have made it pretty clear that you can't sue. You don't have what's called a private right of action, really fancy way of saying you can't just bring a lawsuit for violating FERPA in federal court. And to date, there have been very few successful PPRA, if any, lawsuits. We think that needs to change. We think the laws need to change. We think that the Department of Education should change that. But those ones don't have as much teeth from that perspective. There are other ways to sue on them, and we can talk about that because we can get really creative. But Title VI, Title IX, you file administrative complaints, file civil rights complaints with the Department of Education, or you can file federal lawsuits.
So let's talk a little bit about what the PPR, what that private right of action would look like. I've learned about this also. I was talking to Andy Liddell from the EdTech Law Center about this, and he was mentioning that. I honestly had never heard of that phrase before, or if I had, I just didn't remember it. But it feels almost like the law was passed intentionally with almost no ability to be enforced based on that. Why would that private right of action not have been included? And what does it look like? What encouragement, I guess, or what suggestions do you have to parents if they feel like there's been a violation to even try to pursue it and not feel hopeless?
Yeah, I mean, the why answer is your political reasons, right? It's the same reason why in many other areas, right? So this is one area of constitutional law where we work, but property rights, restoring constitutional balance, all of these other areas, we come up across the same thing. It's how do you sue to get in court? And if you have a right that's created by a statute, so it's created by a law, whether it's federal or state, that federal entity or the state entity, the legislature, can say whether or not you can sue on it. And so, there's other ways you could file to ask the court to issue a declaration, which is basically them making a statement about something, or to enjoin something, which is that they stop enforcement of something. But in this situation, the Supreme Court has actually looked at this issue and said, nope, FERPA just doesn't give you the ability to file a lawsuit. So,
wow.
It's just a fact that we deal with every day. And it's a question we get a lot, like I said, across all areas. If people are like, why can't we just file a lawsuit? Why can't we just sue? And you don't have a way to do it.
And so it has to come from another institution. Is that right? Like there's
the legislature could, so Congress in this situation could amend the law, or the Department of Education may be able to create other enforcement mechanisms available in it if they've been delegated that power. And so Congress has certain powers. They can delegate some of those powers to agencies, not all of them. And that's where you start to get into all the stuff that I love, the red meat of constitutional law, but stuff that parents really don't need to worry about. What I really would hope that anyone watching this takes away from it is that FERPA says I have a right to my kids' information and to stop it from being disclosed. PPRA means that they have to give consent for surveys to be asked, and I can access all instructional materials. And if your school is violating those, you can use these words. You can send them an email. You can send them a letter and say, you are violating FERPA. You are violating PPRA. Because 98% of parents don't know what those are and have never heard about them. You have a basic understanding of them. you know that it applies here, and they're going to take you that much more seriously.
Yeah. And if nothing else, I think just knowing it and being able to quote that to them shows that your intention and the limited bit of research you may or may not have done. And like you said, they'll take you more seriously.
Yeah.
Well, that touches on actual advocacy and what that would look like. So, what would you say are some of the most, obviously, we have a lot of parents here that are trying to speak up. We have many new people that are joining, which is so fantastic. We're so excited to have new chapters and new members. But sometimes when you're new, we don't know exactly what to do. So, what would you say are the most common mistakes parents make when they are first starting or when they try to speak up?
They let it go on too soon or too long, I mean. And so I think that that's the number one thing, is that if something is happening to your kid, I'm trying to think of an example. Let's use compelled speech, because everyone can understand that your kid's teacher is making them stand up and in some way, shape, or form pledge allegiance or honor the pride flag. It's June. Let's just use that example. And it happens one day, and then it happens another day, and then it happens a third day, and you haven't reached out to the school, or you've only been reaching out to the teacher and sending, maybe hostile emails or this, that, or the other. What you need to do right away is start documenting. Document it, and as fast as you can, send an email to the administrator that you'd like to have a meeting or that you'd like to have a conversation and find out what's happening. Because when you don't document the facts and you let it go on, if you want to take legal action, it's very hard for an attorney to try to piece together what actually happened. And we don't all remember things correctly sometimes. And you're also dealing with kids, and they certainly don't remember things correctly all the time. And so you end up with these messy facts, and it makes it really hard for groups like ours to help parents when we have messy facts.
So let's unpack that for just a minute,
Yeah.
because I think when we live in the space of this, it's easy to forget that documentation can mean all sorts of things. So what sort of records or paper trail, or let me give you a quick example. So when I actually have worked in HR before in the business world, and one of the things that I had as a tip relative for one of my professors actually was that if there was an issue, to send yourself an email dated, like when something happened, as soon as you found out about it, and file it right away. So now you've got a timestamp, a date of whenever that happened, so you don't lose track of it as far as the timeline. So that sort of a thing, as an example. What other kind of records or paper trails would you recommend that families keep?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example. I think that if you meet or talk to a teacher, if there's an issue, or an administrator, just like you would if there's an issue with kids in the class, right? Like, I mean, you got to think like back to daycare, right? And your kid gets bit by another kid, or I'm just, thinking of an example. It's going to get documented right away. They're going to call you, send an email after that call and say, thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you for meeting with me, whatever. Thank you for talking to me in carpool. This is what we talked about, and this is my understanding. Do I understand this correct? And try to get that response back, because when they acknowledge that, that goes a long way. If they want to clarify it, then they had a different understanding of that conversation than you did, and you want to know about that right now. Because let's say you do need to file a lawsuit. Let's say you do file a complaint, and you need to pursue it for whatever reason, or because it's just the right thing to do, and you're trying to make change in your school. Then that could come up down the road in a deposition or in a court document. And your facts, you guys just are not seeing this eye to eye. And so anything you can to get that confirmation of how they see things is really important.
I love the way you worded that too. And I just want to highlight that, because I think that it is so easy to hear about something and just fly off the handle right away. I'm not saying that everybody does, but when someone comes after your kids, it's like Mama Bear comes out and you're going to protect them. But talk about it as appreciation, thanking the person, whoever it was, for the conversation, but then soliciting a response of, did I understand that correctly? That feels like such a unoffensive and unassuming way to get a response, as opposed and not like accusatory or anything. So I really like that wording. I just wanted to highlight that. Very good.
It tends to work pretty good. I'm a mom too. I write then down that road with everyone else here.
You've got some history with it. Makes sense. Okay, so one of the things that we love about SLF is all the different trainings and resources that you have to offer to our parents, but also to our chapters. And I know that we have so many things. I'd love for you to take a second just to highlight some of the trainings that our chapters in particular may not realize about, and that they could reach out to help educate the parents and the members in their community.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Because it's one of our favorite things to do here is to get together with the chapters or do things on a national level, and I'll kind of take them in turn. So one of the things that we have out there is we have just an overall comprehensive it's a guide to understanding your child's rights, but it's not just your child's rights, it's parental rights. So we have a comprehensive guidebook about that. It's the first one that we put out back in 2021, if I recall, the very beginning of 2021. And we have a legal boot camp that goes along with it, where we talk some about what we talked about today, really talk about practical tips. And we love to do that one with individual chapters. So especially as you guys are growing and having new chapters joining, we can do that over Zoom in the evening. And the guidebook kind of serves as a companion. And then we've also got guidebooks and trainings on Title IX. We have ones on the First Amendment. We have ones for students also. So we do a free speech and First Amendment training for students, typically for college, but I've actually been going into some high schools and giving it the training to AP government classes lately, which has been a great experience. Yeah, and private schools. No public schools have invited us yet. We've had a few great private Christian schools that have invited us in. And so, yeah, First Amendment, legal boot camp, Title IX, and then this fall we'll be rolling out a new guidebook on understanding the public school system. So that will come sometime in August, September, right before the National Summit, which just got announced on social media. I saw earlier today.
That's right. Yeah, super excited for that. In second weekend in October, we're going to be in Dallas, Texas. So very excited for that. And I'm sure we'll see you there. But we'll hold all that information for another time, because so many exciting things coming down the way. I love the idea of you going into the AP government. That's such a great thing to teach to the students.
I got to say, it was actually pretty cool. Was that the first time we did this, it was my AP government teacher. And that's really cool. He was still teaching, but now teaching at my kids' school that they had been at for the last 8 years. And it was he was getting ready to retire. And he shot me an email and asked if, here we are 30 years later, if I could come in and guest teach his class.
Oh my gosh.
It was pretty special.
That is really cool. That's awesome.
And it just kind of launched from there.
I love that. Well, I want to make sure that everyone hears that, because that's a really great opportunity to have someone, because sometimes, we're just a parent, just a mom or whatever, but you got some real teeth behind you. You've got the whole legal practice. So you have some good things that you can share. So I want to ask, because of these trainings, they're so important, and it's important for parents to understand, not just parents to learn this, but kids too. Why is it so important to learn this early, to learn it now before a crisis actually hits?
Because it's almost too late then, right? And so what happens, like we mentioned, is that the facts start to spiral out of control. It can get really, really messy, really, really quick. And if you have the terminology and you have a basic understanding, you almost know to kind of pump the brakes for a second and say, okay, I need to send this through the Moms for Liberty intake process. Or I need to reach out to Southeastern Legal Foundation through their web portal, or, most people just email me directly, because we've been working with you guys for so long that everyone's become friends. Like when I see the summit, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to see everyone. Right. And so you know that you need to reach out and that you need to get additional advice where somebody can say, yeah, there's probably a legal issue here. You need to move slow, or probably not. You just probably need to get this fixed for your kid and get it fixed ASAP because it's not really worth a lawsuit here. Just get it fixed and move on. And so you can get that kind of litmus test, if you will, if you're already educated on these issues.
Yep. And I will add one extra piece, in my opinion, is when you're in it, when you're in the fire, you've already got so much in your brain that trying to understand all the rights and all the terminology and what it means and why it's important and what did you miss, like you said, trying to find the documentation and think back and all that. It's so much. It can become very overwhelming. So take a minute now, learn it now. This stuff isn't that hard. You guys have such good guidebooks, such good trainings available. So I think that's a really important point.
No, I appreciate that. I want to add, I'm going to pause you really quick. I want to add one other little thing. Don't feel like you have to become an expert. Right? So we're talking so much about these detailed terminologies, and like, you're probably watching this and you might even feel overwhelmed or pausing it to take notes. First of all, it's in the guidebooks. So you can go on our website and download them all for free. They're not even behind an email, like paywall, anything like that. Just download them. Easy to get to. But the other thing is, you don't have to be an expert in this. You don't have to have gone to law school. You already have the basic tools. We're smart moms, right? We cannot be underestimated. You know that there's First Amendment rights. You know the government can't treat people differently because of the color of their skin or because of their sex. Like, you already know a lot of this. So anyway, I just wanted to pause so that people don't feel overwhelmed by what we're talking about.
No, I really appreciate you reinforcing that, because that is true. It's important to remember that this stuff maybe there's certain words or phrases that might be a new way to put it, but in reality, these concepts are things that most of us probably know the majority of it. So that's really encouraging. It just helps to know the term sometimes. And then you sound all like so strong and mighty, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think one of the things that we've been dealing with a lot lately, and this is, I'll take this and then I'll kind of wrap it up, but I'm curious, why do you feel like schools are acting, or I don't know, they're fighting so much on transparency? That's something that Moms for Liberty really fights for, is transparency across the board. You know, what's in the curriculum, what's in the books that my children are reading or that are in the library? What is the AI algorithm? Where is AI being used, right? That's going to be the new one. But why do schools fight that so hard when parents start asking?
I mean, I think it's a shift of power, right? So when we know what's happening in our kids' schools and when we know what's happening in the classroom, we now have the power to have those discussions with our kids, to say, well, this is what happened in this lesson, and they taught you X, Y, and Z. Let's dissect that. Let's have a real conversation about the Civil War. Let's have a real conversation at home about the Civil Rights Act, or, you know, even about science, right? I mean, pick your topic. Is that you as parents now are enabled to have those conversations with your kids, that the powers that be, probably not the teachers, probably not even the principals, but that the teachers unions and the curriculum companies don't want you to have that level of access. And I mean, they're fighting tooth and nail, right? We just took a case to the US Supreme Court, and we're asking them to hear our client's case because she's fighting to get one survey that her school said was copyrighted and would not give her a copy of or full access to. I mean, it's insane the lengths that they'll go to. We're going to go to the Supreme Court to get a survey.
I want to pause you on that and actually ask you to unpack a little bit, because every time I hear this, I mean to ask, and then I always forget. How is this possibly a thing, to say that parents cannot see something, the curriculum or a survey or whatever, because it's a copyright? I mean, are they expecting us to go sell it? Isn't that the purpose of copyright, is to protect against sale? Why is this argument used?
It absolutely is. So, I mean, to break it down, it's really the intersection of a lot of laws that kind of come together. So you're the curriculum company. You create, let's just say, the survey. And because you created it and you sell it, it has a copyright protection with it. Then I'm a parent. I go to the school and I say, I am asking for a copy of that under state open record law. Okay. The state open record law says that the school can't give you anything that is copyright protected. So the school can easily say, well, that document's copyright protected. I can't give it to you because we might get sued by the curriculum company.
Well,
It's this
what
back
about
and forth
PPRA?
thing. Well, that also comes into play, but you can't file a case on that. That's kind of that's the issue, and they know that. And so what we did is we have a client, her name's Miranda Stovall. She's in Kentucky. I actually just did Unleashed with Scarlett with Miranda, and we dove into the case for about an hour, honestly. So if anyone wants to know more, they can go watch that. But we filed a lawsuit on her behalf saying she only wants it for a fair use. This is not copyright protected because she does not want to sell it. So copyright, you can use copyright documents, you can reproduce them if you're not selling them. And quite honestly, I mean, I don't know why the school is fighting it so hard. I don't know why the survey writer, the curriculum company, it's Pearson, is fighting it so hard, because it's one survey. And if you really don't care about sharing it with parents, then you would just waive that. But they haven't, because they know that if they do it there, parents are going to be able to get everything because they only want it for a fair use. They only want to know what's happening in their kid's classroom. So we're now in this catch-22 where the federal court has said it's a state law issue. State law courts say it's a federal law issue, and nobody wants to hear our case. So we're taking it to the Supreme Court saying, tell us where we can sue so we can actually proceed with our lawsuit and get this survey and essentially open up all surveys to parents throughout the country. Your question on PPRA is a great one. They should be able to get a copy of it because PPRA, it's an instructional material. But the school is not giving it over, and you can't file a lawsuit saying they violated PPRA. So anyway, this is a fight that needs to be had. The fight is not over with this lawsuit. If there's other parents that are dealing with this issue, we want to hear from you. So I'm glad we got to talk about this. I said it like 5 times on Charlotte, on Scarlett's podcast on Unleashed, but we want to hear from you if you're dealing with this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That is crazy. And I'll make sure that we link to that show or the interview in the description here so people can get to it. One other thing that we talked about previously, and we've got a little bit more time, I want you to talk to something that I'm seeing in my area, and what should parents be aware of or concerned, or how to fight in this example. And so that is, I see as a taxpayer, because all of my children are graduated from K-12 school, so they're not in the K-12 school district or school system anymore. But if I was concerned about curriculum or books in a library or something like that, I would want to be able to have a say in that, because my tax dollars are paying for this curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's in my district specifically, but I know it is in a neighboring district that there was a policy passed just very recently that if you didn't have kids in the school, then you were not allowed to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Which that just seems crazy. So they're willing to take my money, but they're not going to let me have any opinion, what? So just help me unpack that. Am I crazy for feeling that way? And what should parents be, on the alert for? Can they do anything?
So speech at school boards is a complicated issue that shouldn't be complicated. And we talk to parents about this all the time. We have several cases on this going on. School boards can put reasonable, what's called time, place, and manner restrictions on speech during a school board meeting, because they have to get their business done during it. And so they can say you can only talk for 2 minutes. You can't shout, you have to sign up in advance, all of those kind of things. But when those restrictions, if you will, when those parameters start to actually regulate the content of what's being said or discriminate because of viewpoint, And what I mean by the discriminate on viewpoint, it's you want to get up and say, I don't like the social studies curriculum. Bob wants to get up and say, I love it. And they let Bob speak, but they don't let you speak. That's viewpoint discrimination. They're not letting you speak because of your opinion there or your view on it. So if they start to say anything like that, that's unconstitutional. But unfortunately, school boards can put a number of these restrictions on the public comment portion of the school board meetings. In a few states, they can't. That's precedent, right? That's court law that we actually need to expand throughout the country. So this is something that I think courts really need to revisit. We at SLF are dedicated and determined to bringing these cases and getting courts to revisit it. But right now, what you need to know is some restrictions are okay. Some restrictions aren't okay. All of this is detailed in our First Amendment guidebook. And so if you want to, we have charts on it, what you can say, what you can't, what's allowed, what's not allowed. So I would recommend that people look there first. But again, they can always reach out to us or go through the legal intake, and we can tell you in your state, this is the law right now.
That's extremely helpful because I think that it's just so hard to keep track of all these things and to really understand. But that's a really good point, though, that you made, that they do actually have to get business done. So I do understand it. But it's good to know what your rights are because it is our tax dollars that's funding it. So
it is. I mean, and the public comment portion, if you want to get up and talk about the curriculum in your kid's class, but they're refusing to put that on the agenda, even if you've asked them 20 times, just because they don't want you to talk about it. I mean, where's the line there? And that's where we kind of come in and say, this is where we have to bring these cases. And that's why, something that we didn't talk about, and we probably don't have time to get into today, but it's the difference between kind of defensive litigation and proactive litigation. And we bring proactive litigation here at SLF. So it's finding an issue like that or the copyright issue and knowing what law needs to change in the courtroom, right? What cases do courts need to hear so that we can fix things in the law through the courts. We bring those types of cases, but there's a lot of really fact-specific cases where you guys need representation. And there's so many other amazing public interest law firms that also represent their clients for free, just like we do, that we can always get you in touch with, or Moms for Liberty Nationals can get you in touch with.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's excellent. And I appreciate, I would like to unpack that. What did you call it? Defensive versus proactive?
So it's defensive versus proactive litigation.
Okay. All right. Yeah. We'll have to unpack that on
for another day.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you as always. We always love having you here. And of course, I know you've already said it a couple times. You've mentioned some of the resources, but where exactly can people find you? Where can they follow all of the great work that you're doing? And how can they reach out to you if they need your help?
Yeah. I mean, if you go to our website, it's slfliberty.org. You can reach us through X. It's at SLF_Liberty. You can DM us. You can email us through the website. And if you want to do a training or get one set up for your chapter, we would love to talk to you guys about that. So feel free to reach out.
Sounds good. I know we will be in touch again. We've always got interesting. Some of it, it's exciting. It's exciting stuff because it's usually good stuff coming out. So fingers will be crossed for your future cases. And I can't wait to talk about that upcoming training you're working on.
Thank you so much for having me today. This was great.
What a great conversation. Kim always has so much good practical advice for our parents. An important thing I hope you'll remember from this conversation is that parental rights aren't some abstract thought, but they only matter if parents know them, use them, and demand that schools respect them. So you've got to hold schools accountable. Of course, this means parents can't afford to just sit back and hope somebody else handles it if there's a problem. Because with parental rights comes the responsibilities, and whether that means learning the law, at least the basics, showing up at school board meetings, documenting concerns right away, like Kim said, or getting connected to the right support, like Southeastern Legal Foundation, the responsibility to protect our kids starts at home. But I think you already know that. If this conversation helped you, hit like and then share it with another parent who needs to hear it. Stay informed, stay involved, and keep standing up for your kids, because the truth is we were lied to about a lot of things. And parents are the ones who have to sort it out and keep fighting for what's right. Thanks again for listening to this very practical conversation, because it is our goal to educate you on the issues and equip you with the tools that you can use as we all become engaged citizens, not enraged activists. After all, the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty, as James Madison said, which is the mission of M4L Academy. Class dismissed.